And joining me now with more additional perspective on the fast-moving developments in Iraq is J.D. Gordon. He's a communications consultant and former Pentagon spokesperson. Welcome back to the show, J.D.
Thanks, Elaine.
As we mentioned, things are just moving very quickly there. Was this movement into Crete a surprise? Do you think anyone in the international community had any idea that this would be taking place at this magnitude?
Elaine, thanks for having me on the show. I think it's a surprise to many, but if you look what's happening in Syria, Al-Qaeda has perhaps never been stronger in a way, in that they have so much territory now, stretching from areas of Syria into Iraq. They're strong in Yemen as well, and I think a lot of people are surprised about how strong they really are.
Talk about the role that some of the regional players could play in this conflict right now. Iran, Syria, and how much of what is happening in Syria right now driving what is taking place in Iraq today?
Well, what's happening in Syria is bleeding over into Iraq today. Already well over 160,000 people have been killed in Syria in the last 4 years. And what we've seen is basically a proxy war that continues to burn in the Middle East between the Shia branch of Islam and the Sunni branch of Islam. Iran, of course, is driving and funding the Shias, and Saudi Arabia is driving and funding the Sunnis. And so Al-Qaeda represents the Sunni branch, and those are the folks who feel very disenfranchised by Saddam Hussein falling, because Saddam Hussein was a Sunni, which is a minority in Iraq. It's only about 35% of the people. Saddam ruled with an iron fist over the Shia. And so when then Saddam Hussein fell and the U.S. troops all pulled out, well, the new government in Iraq is Shia aligned with Iran. And that upsets Al-Qaeda, that upsets all the Sunnis there. So frankly, where the areas that are have more Sunnis, in the north part of Iraq, for instance, they want more autonomy. They're not getting it. They're still kind of under a tough role from Nouri al-Maliki and the Shia-led government in Baghdad. So naturally, they want more autonomy. And the Islamists, the terrorist elements, are very strong there. That's why they've been able to take over places like Mosul and Tikrit.
Does the international community get involved at some point? Turkey is already being dragged in with the capture of some of its consulate members there in Iraq. What happens now?
You know, I don't think the international community is very quick to get involved again in Iraq. The United States was already bogged down there since 2003. President Obama came into office. One of his big campaign promises was to get the U.S. out of Iraq. But, you know, since the U.S. doesn't have any troops there, we don't have influence there. So Iraq has gravitated towards the Iranian influence. So I don't think the U.S. Or the international community is going to be very quick to get involved, even if it gets worse than this, and I think it will, because they weren't involved in Syria. Syria is another situation where it could be like another Iraq. And so both those, I think, are going to be even more violent. And I think you're going to see Iran and Saudi Arabia backing their sides even more. Doubling down, if you will, between the Shia branch of Islam and the Sunnis on the other hand. And they both call each other apostates. And both are actually in a competition to wipe each other out in many ways, especially the radicals. But also, they have a bullseye on the backs of the United States as well. So it's a very difficult situation for the U.S. and our allies in the Middle East and for Europe. It's very dangerous, and I think more people will die, unfortunately.
What happens now with Nouri al-Maliki? He's coming out, you know, to his country, trying to calm fears, but also having harsh words for the troops that deserted their posts. Behind the scenes, what do you think is happening? Because, you know, we heard Sean mention in his report that the Wall Street Journal is reporting that he is reaching out to the United States and perhaps other countries for help.
Yeah, isn't that ironic? Nouri al-Maliki didn't want to sign a status of force agreement which would have allowed U.S. troops to stay, at least some, not a lot, 5,000, 10,000 U.S. troops. But no, he didn't want that. He wanted them all out, and I think Barack Obama should have been tougher to keep at least some troops there for training the Iraqi military, for having the ability to have drone strikes, for instance, in Iraq. But that's off the table now. So now that it gets worse, Nouri al-Maliki now wants the U.S. back. I don't think that the U.S. people have the appetite for that.
All right, J.D. Gordon, as always, we appreciate your perspective and your insight.
Thank you, Elaine.